This is the Monterey Bay, home to the largest submarine canyon on the coast of North America and within the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. The Monterey Bay's history of fishing goes back many years, in fact thousands of years. That story is coming up. Recently, as part of the Monterey Bay Sanctuary's Voices of the Bay program, a group of students were given the opportunity to learn about the history of the Monterey Bay and specifically the fishing industry, giving the students a first-hand look at where their food comes from, how it gets to the market, and eventually to their tables. Let's start things off with an onboard explanation from fisherman Jane DeLay.
We have the deepest marine canyon in North America right out here. Deeper than the Grand Canyon. Have you guys been to the Grand Canyon or seen pictures of it? So we have one within distance from shore. So that causes it to be a really healthy area, and so lots of marine species get to come. And when you're on the water, you get to see things like the sea lion all the time. Besides getting to work outside and to work with really, really nice people. So this is the boat that I work on. It's the Seahawk. And you see our name? And the owner and the captain is Mike Ricketts right here. This is Mike. Hi, Mike. And he's been fishing for almost 40 years. That's a long time. And I've been fishing for only 10 years. So I'm still learning a lot from Mike because I'm the deckhand or the crew, and he's the captain. So he's teaching me what it's like to be safe and to be really successful as a fisherman on the water. And he's also teaching me about the boat. The main thing when we get on board the boat, and you're welcome to come on board the boat, we'll go on one at a time. It's an uneven surface on the boat, so please look where you're stepping because it goes down and up. The rule on the boat is always have one hand holding on and both feet flat on the deck, understand? And then you can just kind of spread out and I'll meet you on there. If you don't want to get on the boat, that's okay, just stand here on the cement and we'll still be able to answer your questions, understand? All right, let's get on. And watch your step, and this is the survival line. And just move all the way on, and you can go down here too if you want to. Do you want to go? Yeah. Okay, go for it. Spread out, you can spread out. Hold on and get on if you want to. Don't waste any time, get on board. We need to go fishing. So when you touch things on a fishing boat, be careful because things are really sharp. Try not to move anything because we've got them in a special order so we can get them out quickly and fast, and we get them on the right line. But you can see the hooks and you can see the type of gear to attract the fish and the leader that attaches them to the line. That's what the baskets are. So look at the baskets, guys, but please try not to touch them.
What if it falls down?
They're nailed to the deck.
Oh.
Right. And so we bring the fish on board this way up the back. So we bring the fish because the lines are behind the boat, and we bring them on board the boat, and then we net the fish and turn around. Remember what I said. I was really serious. When you're on board a boat, you have to have one hand holding on. So there's a survival line right here. You can touch right here. And both feet on the deck. It's not a place to goof off or horse around, because you could really fall, and when you fall, it hurts. Believe me, it hurts, because you always hit your head or a knee or something on something sharp. Do you have enough room back there? Cool. So make way a little bit so some others can see it. So the boat is rigged right now for salmon fishing, commercial salmon fishing. How many of you like salmon? How many of you had salmon? Yeah? But you don't like salmon? That's good. You know, you either like some of you like it and some of you don't. That's how it's. That's kind of natural that way. What do you think we use the table for?
To cut the fish?
Right, to clean and catch the fish. So remember. So we have the line, we have the fish. So you've got the gurneys and the motors are right here. And interrupt me when you've got questions. Here we've got these attached. See how that pole is long out there, sticking out? It does. We never use a net to fish on this boat. We use hook and line only or trap for Dungeness crab. But we bring the fish in, see the hooks, see the leaders and the hooks in the basket? They attach to this wire that goes out behind the boat. And then we bring the fish in, it brings to the back of the boat, and then we put it on the table. And this is where we measure it, and then we cut it and clean it and put it in the tank. And then we bring it to you. Do you want to see the inside of the cabin?
Yeah.
You're welcome to go in. Go in back down the stairs. So back, turn around and go down the stairs facing the stairs. When we bring the fish on and it's a legal size, then we cut it and clean it. And we take out the insides, but we leave the head and the tail whole. And that's how we bring it to market. And you can buy it that way whole. Yeah, that was a great question. So can I get down? I'll share some things about the cabin with you if you'd like me to. All right, be careful. But we've got our depth sounder. This is also the depth sounder, and we've got the radar. So you can see the boats lining up. This is our GPS. There's another radar navigator. And we've got the 2 radios. This one will go, this is an international radio. That'll go around the world if we need to. And then we've got the other depth sounder here. So we always know how deep and what the temperature of the water is, because salmon like a certain degree temperature. We always know what our speed is, and we always know where we are relative to the harbor and to the area around us. You know, when you're out there in the fog, you can't see anything, so you don't know which direction you're going. So you really rely on the compass and the different radars and the GPS. This is the bunk. So right now we've got it for storage, but that's where I lay out my sleep. I take all that stuff out and I lay the sleeping bag, and that's where we sleep. That's a type of radar. And that's a really important radar because that tells us how fast the other big boats are coming and which direction they're traveling. Because sometimes on this radar you can see that it's a boat, you can see that it's a target, but you can't tell which direction it's going and how fast it's going and how big it is. And so you might run right into, so that's good. It tells us how fast it's going to come so we don't hit it and it doesn't hit us. We have to let you go now. Thanks for coming on board the boat.
A big thank you to Jane DeLay for a look at life on a hook and line fishing boat, the Seahawk. Other fishing boats use nets. Let's check in with Jerry Nozica as he addresses the students on how the net is used.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Jerry. I'm not going to bother you with my last name, and because it's very hard to say. So anyway, so you can call me Jerry. I'm a commercial fisherman. I live in Monterey in the last 12 years. So I was not born here. I was not raised here, and I was not even raised as a fisherman. I became fisherman in my late 20s. I'm 38 years old. I'm gonna be 39, so I was 28 when I first came here and I started fishing. So if anybody wants to become a fisherman and gonna think, hey, I can never be a fisherman, I was not born there, I'm a proof that it's not the case. So if any one of you wants to become a fisherman, if you have a love for the ocean and if you have a passion for the ocean, you can become, because if you don't, most likely you will hate it. And you will not want to do it because it's a very hard job. It's very time consuming, time demanding. It's not really rewarding financially. So if you want to ever make lots of money, most likely you will not. But it's a job that is very rewarding in a way that we have a really nice work to place. We have the ocean, whole ocean to work at. We have a beautiful air to breathe when we work, and when we come in and we bring our fish to people and we see smiles on their faces, that's our reward. When we bring the food and you guys like fish? Yeah. Yeah. So you like any, do you know any local fish that you like to see on your plate? We catch sand dabs. Do you know sand dabs? Yeah. Do you like halibut? Yeah. Do you like rock cod? You like salmon? All right. You like black cod? Have you ever seen a black cod? You like anchovies? Sardines? You like sole? Sole? Do you like sole? Flatfish? So anyway, we have lots of fish over here in this. This what you see, it's not the ocean. This is a really small part, and it's actually, if you look on the map of Monterey Bay, and you actually look down in this area where we are, where you see the breakwater wall that protects the harbor here from the big wave and winds, then you actually see how small this part of this bay is. So we don't really fish inside of the bay here. We don't fish in this area. You can find a hook and line fisherman, you can catch crab here, you can catch sardines and squid they catch here. But me personally, I don't catch here. We can fish historically 3 miles offshore. So if you look, I don't know if you can see it from here. You guys can see the red buoy right there? Yeah. That's 1 mile away from here. So 3 times as far, that would be the closest point that I will be able to fish from here. And we used to fish here, but in the last 5 years, our government doesn't allow us that anymore. And so we cannot catch halibut here locally and with our nets. I fish commercially with a bottom trawl. I have a model here, so I'll show you after how the net looks when it's fishing in the water. Did you ever catch butterflies with the butterfly net, with the bug net? Yeah. It's a similar principle, only we have a big net. It's much bigger than a butterfly net, and then we have a boat instead of our hand, and then we can catch the fish in the very shallow waters, about 30 feet deep or even shallower. And we fish that they're up to a 3/4 of a mile deep sometimes, or half a mile deep. So it's very, very deep water, and we use the same nets, and we just use a different system. We just let the net down deeper and deeper as we wish. And anyway, this boat right here, it does different type of fishing. It's called a Nani Lane, and my brother-in-law owns it. And it was built for salmon fishing, and it was built for tuna fishing. So, but mostly for salmon, I think about 50 years ago. So it's made out of wood. And in general, commercial fishermen spends a lot of time on the ocean. So we have to have all of our needs that we have when you go home. You need to go to sleep, you need to eat food, right? You need to, what do you need to do? Sit down, you need to go in the bathroom. All that has to be on the boat. All that has to be accommodated. So if you look at this little boat, most of the deck, which is the working area, is where the fishing is happening. Captain can sit, or skipper can sit on the top of the wheelhouse or inside. The wheelhouse, the steering wheel is upstairs and downstairs as well. And you can see all kinds of winches and lifts and hydraulics, and those are used for to haul the fish out. Because if you go catch fish, did you ever go fishing on the ocean? Any one of you? Wow, 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 wow. So you have a really treat. So did you ever fish on the lake, a river? All right. How many fish did you catch? 1, 2? All right. Okay, so if you wanted to become a fisherman and you were going to sell that fish, how much do you think it would make for those 2 fish that you catch? $5 maybe? Somebody would pay you that, maybe $10. All right, so if you wanted to make a living, you had children like you who need to get nice dress and stuff and shoes, you're gonna need to catch a lot more fish than 2, right? When I go fishing, and most of my fish we get paid on average about 40-50 cents a pound. So if I go fishing with my boat that you can look after on the other side, just on fuel alone, I spend about $1,500 or $2,000 a day. Just on fuel. When I go fishing for 2-3 days, I spend about $4,000 or $5,000 on expenses before I make a dollar. So I have to catch lots and lots of fish. So we bring in anywhere between 10 tons. Sometimes we bring more, sometimes we bring a little less, depending on what fish we're catching. And then a boat like these, in general, they don't really catch that much. They catch fish that are more expensive, and they catch 1, 2, 3 at a time. So they bring 300-400 pounds of fish a day. Sometimes they bring more, 1,000 pounds if they have a really good day. So every fisherman does different things, catches different fish, gets paid different money. With the fish, what do you think the bait needs to be? In the lake, you can use a worm. In the river, you can use a fly. In the ocean, you use a fish. Exactly, because fish eat fish. Most of the fish in the ocean eats other fishes. So they eat, their mommies eat their babies eat their mommies. Babies eat their uncles when they come visit, when they come across them. So it's not a very idyllic place that you might see in Nemo's world. You all see Nemo, right? High-fiving and all that stuff. It's not really happening down there. And so fisherman has to learn to figure out what is the best way to catch that fish. So if you have a fisherman with a hook, he needs to figure out what fish the fish he's trying to catch likes to eat. Where do they live? How do they live? If they sleep at night, if they sleep at day, what time of the day they like to eat their food, what time they hunt. So they need to figure all this stuff, and then they need to do what they think is the right thing. And some fishermen are less successful than others. Some fishermen are very successful. They can catch a lot of fish, and you can be next to them and you don't catch anything, and they catch many fish. And it's because of the nature of how close they got to figuring out where the fish is and how they behave. With the nets, what we catch, we have to figure out similarly. We don't have to figure out what time they eat to bait on we don't have to bait our nets, but we still have to figure out what depths, what areas they live, and what time of the day they gather together. Because if we catch only a handful of fish in the morning, some fish like to gather together in the morning, some like during the full moons. So all these have to be kind of considered by the fishermen and figure it out. And that's why it's very difficult sometimes for fishermen to make a living. And some fishermen can do it because they don't make enough money. So they go do something else, or they become crew members, or they learn more and more as they work in it. It doesn't take 2 months to become a fisherman. It takes your whole life. And eventually you become a fisherman. That's who you're gonna be in your life. It's not gonna be your occupation, but it's who you're gonna be. Just like a farmer loves his land and loves his animals, and he's known as a farmer, and he thinks like a farmer. He thinks about the land all the time. It's the same way the fisherman thinks about the ocean and thinks about the fish and how to catch them all the time. So anyway, I'm gonna show you a few things that I have in my magical suitcase here that I carry around. Where you guys from? Where? Soledad. All right, this is a piece of the net. How do you call a piece of the net? What does a spider puts together to catch its fly? Web. Okay, so this is a webbing. This is not actual net. If I throw this in the water, I won't catch nothing. I might catch something, but not what I want. You have to take a piece of web and put it in certain shapes and put ropes and lines and floats to make it work, make it do what you want it to do. Anyway, in this type of webbing, if you make a net, let's say a purse seiner from this type of a net, I'm gonna catch fish that is bigger than my pinky. If I wanna catch anchovy, which is about this big, it will go through. So most of the anchovies, 99% anchovies, if the fisherman finds a school of anchovies, or he thinks this is sardines, and encircles them and tries to catch them, most of them will go out through this net, and he won't catch any. He catch some, but not much. This net's gonna be good for catching sardines, or mackerel or squid, because they're about that big and they won't get through. They get stuck in. What do you think that happens if the fish finds this in their net? You see that? It's a hole. This one was made by mice, but mice for some reason like this type of nets. If you leave them somewhere, they like the fish oil in them and they just chew them apart. Anyway, you can have a hole like this in the net, and it can cost you several $1,000s in your net if you catch fish. And if your one school that you're trying to catch could be worth up to $20,000, this little hole can cost you several $1,000s of fish running away like crazy and screaming, happy, going home and laughing at the fishermen all the way. Then I have different size of nets over here, different size of webbing. This type of a net is a different material. That is a nylon net. This is mostly plastic. It's a modern style, even though this is about 40 years old. So today's nets are made out of a little bit different, semi-similar stuff. It's much stronger, it doesn't dry up, doesn't shrink much. This size of the mesh would catch shrimp, big shrimp. Have you ever seen Monterey Bay prawns? They're like langostinis. Have you ever seen langostinis? Big shrimp. They're about that big. And you can catch them with this type of a net. It's about 2.5 inches big mesh. And you can actually catch any fish that is smaller than about 3 of my fingers. If anything smaller than this, you won't catch it. And we don't really use any of these of this size nets on any nets at all, because we cannot catch anything small than that. What we use on our nets, it's about size of this mesh, somewhere around here. If you see this mesh right there, that's according to the law for about 70 years now, that the trawl boats cannot have nets that has the end of it made out of a net that are compiled out of the meshes of this size. So if you see my hand, and if you see a fish, locally here it was a rockfish, and specifically it was a fish that's called a chili pepper rockfish. I wish I had some here now, but you guys can do some research when you get home to school, and you can find them. And when you come next time, I hope I have some. But anyway, if the fish is as big as my hand, and they can get through, and if it's big as my hand, it's about 6 years old at this size, on this widest point or behind its head. And if they're 6 years old, they could spawn. You know what spawn means, right? They can have their eggs, lay out their eggs and their babies. Actually, this type of fish, the chili peppers, they actually don't spawn. They lay out their eggs, and they actually carry their little babies inside of them. And they can lay out about 5 million little fish. They're already alive. They don't need to be spawned. And they are born alive, and they're really, really tiny. And within 6 years, they grow into this size. And then they have 4 times they had their babies, up to 4 times. So this is a kind of measurement of or a precaution that's being kept by a fisherman for over 70 years. That because we don't, first of all, if we catch fish that is smaller than this, it doesn't have much meat on it, and you don't get a big dinner out of it. When people cut it on the tables, when they have to cut it, it takes a lot of work, and people complain because the fillets are too small. So fishermen don't really want to catch them because they're too small. They don't get paid enough for them. And second of all, fishermen always thinks about the future. If any one of you wants to become a fisherman, any of my children wants to become a fisherman, I'm thinking about them, that they will have enough fish to catch. So I don't want to catch all the fish with their babies. I always think, okay, these babies will bring fish for me tomorrow. next year, year after. So that's one of the measurements like this. If I cannot catch, there are rules and regulations that prohibit me catch even the rockfish or even bigger fish. So if I'm gonna be a halibut fisherman, I use the net for halibut down in Southern California, because over here we cannot do it at all anymore. In Southern California, if I'm gonna be catching halibut, I'm gonna be using net that's gonna be made out of meshes about this big, even a little bit bigger. And you can see that all the fish that I can put almost 2 of my hands. If the fish is that big, it can get through. And that's another, because the halibut are much bigger. And if we wanna catch a halibut that's about same age, 4 or 5 years old, they can fit right through and swim away. So this is one of the measurements that we use for our future. That I'm gonna show you. Okay, I'm gonna need 3 volunteers. Okay, so can everybody see, or if you wanna go around so you can see a little bit better. This is how my net looks like in general when it's fishing in the water. Remember when I told you about the butterfly net? Kind of looks like it a little bit, huh? Doesn't it? So what I have to do in order for this net to work, I have to tow it around. Sometimes we tow it around for 6-7 hours. So we have to have very long stretches. Like if you see the beach, that would be the area where we want to fish. It's flat, it doesn't have any rocks, doesn't have any much hills. Because if I put this on the bottom, it goes along the bottom and I start towing it around and there's the rock sticking out of the ground, I'm gonna make a whole bunch of, remember those holes, right? If the fish sees a hole, they swim right through it, so I lose money. If I rip the net over some rock or reef or coral reef or whatever, I destroy my net. If I destroy my net, this net cost me about $30,000, $40,000 with my gear. So I don't want to lose my net. That's what keeps me fishing. If I lose just one day of fishing, just on fuel, remember, it cost me about $3,000 or $2,000 just one day. So just the nature of this kind of fishing makes sure that we do not fish in the areas that are actually most populated by some of the fishes. So with these type of nets, we can catch lots of flatfish. We catch some rockfishes as well. We catch, even crab. We catch pretty much everything that swims around the bottom of the ocean. But we catch it in the areas there that have been fished for over 100 years locally here. And we fish in the same areas over and over and over, sometimes 10 times a day. So it just shows you how actually, if anybody talks about I'm sure you heard the sustainability word. It's the magic word in these days. So it really shows you that this type of fishing is really sustainable because it's a long term, because we fish in the same area over and over and over. And it's very costly, it's very hard work, because if you have 3-4 tons of fish on the deck and you have only 1 or 2 hours to put it on the ice, because when we go fishing, we go here or we go to Salinas and we buy ice, or somebody brings it with the ice truck. We have to put 3, 4, 5 tons of ice every trip we go out fishing to make sure that the fish stays fresh. We don't freeze them. And then we bring them here, and it takes a lot of work to process this kind of fish that we do. And our main goal is to make a living out of it so we can make enough money for ourselves. Anyway, if you guys have let's have a 5-minute questions, and then you guys can, if you want to take a look on some of these things, actually touch them, and if you want to do it like that. Anybody has any questions?
Where did
These,
these go?
imagine that this would be, this actually right here, you can see, you have 2 of them. Before, these pieces, normally they're made out of steel. Remember, this is a model. They're made out of steel, and they're being towed. See if they're hooked up like this to the boat. Boat would be all the way here, somewhere, floating up and pulling on this. Before, there used to have to be two boats, one pulling this way, another boat pulling at the same speed the other way, and they called it a pair trawling. There were two boats. And then about 80 years after the war, fishermen figure out that they can use these devices, which we call the doors. Some people call them otter boards. And these pieces of steel can do the job of two boats because they're hooked up under angle, so every time you pull them through the water, they have a tendency to spread out to the sideways, like a kite in the air, in the wind. See how they are? So if you start pulling them, they go sideways. So they will always want to spread out the net, and because they're heavy, they're going to keep it down on the ocean, on the bottom of the ocean. And they kind of flop around like this, and sometimes they even spin. And they don't really, because we pull on them really hard. So it's a combination between the doors and the net, how much fish we're gonna catch and how well the gear actually works. If this net bounces too much, if it's too light on the bottom, all the fish goes underneath. And if it gets too heavy, and if it's really heavy on the bottom of the ocean and we throw this net through the soft mud or something, it gets really, the mud gets sucked into the net and it becomes really heavy, and we can actually lose the gear as well. So this type of fishing gear has to be really well balanced for the type of fishing and type of bottom that we want to fish in. Yeah. Well, this is just the model. The normal net, it would look just like this, but they would be much bigger. This is, imagine this, these meshes, this one is actually made exactly to the real size net, mesh to mesh, but the meshes would be about the 4.5 inches like I showed you. So they would be from this point to that point would be about 30 feet wide, and they're about, this net particular would be about 5 feet high. So you can think about, it'll be a little bit wider than this road right here. So it's like about that. Okay, anything? Any other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Me personally, I don't think I caught any submarines, but the boat I fish on caught the submarine once in its gear and almost caught everybody's life. We catch, in the past, there have been caught bombs, airplanes. If you ever do a research about USS Macon, which was the airship, the blimp, they got lost off the coast of Big Sur before the World War II. It was the last and largest US Navy airship. And it got lost in the storm off the coast of Big Sur. And a fisherman been finding pieces of the ship and airplanes from that ship, because he had airplanes on it, for about 40 years. In these nets, they've been pulling them out. And that's actually how that airship has been discovered, the wreck, because the fishermen been finding all these pieces there. Yeah, so we find all kinds of torpedoes. And, my brother-in-law caught a big shark one time. It was a basking shark or a cow shark. And they're scavengers on the bottom of the ocean. And when they lifted him up to put him back in the water by its tail, because it was really big, they had to use a crane to do that. When they lifted him up, the wallet of some Japanese gentleman fell out of its mouth. It was on national news a few years back. But I don't think it was that he ate him, but he just found it somewhere floating on the bottom. So, anyway. That's for me. Yeah. It's money. Well, thank you for coming, and please enjoy Monterey. It's really beautiful, and you have to come here more often.
The Monterey Bay's history goes back thousands of years. To find out more, let's meet Monterey Fishing Historian Tim Thomas on a windy day on the wharf.
Who likes to eat fish? All right. So, Monterey actually has a long history of fishing, but probably longer than you guys actually think, People have been fishing in the Monterey area for almost 5,000 years. Can you believe that? So this area all over there by the older Monterey Wharf, that old custom house area, that whole area sits on the site of what was once a large Rumsian fishing village. The Rumsian were the native people of Monterey, right? So if you think about what Monterey was like 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago, it was a land of lots of little lakes. There was lots of fresh water. There was huge herds of deer and tule elk and grizzly bears. And I have read accounts from early explorers coming into the Monterey area, and they would talk about bird life, particularly in the fall months, September and October. They said so many birds. They said they couldn't see the surface of the little lakes. They would look out into this bay out here, and it'd be so filled with seals and sea lions and stellar sea lions and sea otters that they actually thought that the bay was paved. That they wrote into their diaries that the Monterey Bay was like a brown cobblestone, like a little roadway out there. At certain times of the year, waves would crash up onto the beach, pouring fish onto the beach. That's how abundant it was out there. Oh, so what does that tell you about life here for the Rumsian people? There were a lot of fishes, exactly, yeah. Sorry?
It was very easy.
Easy, exactly. As far as we know, there was never any time of hunger for the Rumsian people. And they would go out into the bay, and beautiful boats like this one you see right here, only bigger, right? These boats are made out of tule, or grasses that grow all over around the little lakes around there. And they would go out there and they would fish for everything that was out there. They make beautiful little fish hooks out of abalone or mussel shell. Let's see here, I think I've got one. Here we go. So here's an abalone shell fish hook, like this one. Or they make the fishing line out of a stinging nettle plant. They would use traps, they would use baskets, they would use spears. And what I actually personally think is the coolest thing in the whole world, that they were the first divers going into the Monterey Bay. Can you believe that? I mean, Monterey Bay is like the dive capital of the world, right? If you come down here on the weekend with you were here last weekend, right? So if you come down there on the weekend with your parents on a Saturday and Sunday and walk over there by the Coast Guard Pier or by the Monterey Bay Aquarium, that place would be filled with rubber people. But the Rumsian were the first divers going into the bay. And you know how we know that? Because of burials that have come out of the ground in recent years. And you cannot build a house along the Monterey waterfront without running across the Rumsian burial or two. The males have what's known as surfer's ear, which is a little bony growth that will grow over the opening of your ear if you're spending a lot of time in the cold water like the Monterey Bay. Which makes a lot of sense, don't you think? If you saw an abalone this big, you all know what abalone is? What is it?
It's like a seashell, but something.
Yeah, it's a snail is what it is, right? So if you saw an abalone this big, you're going to dive down there and get it. And abalone played a very important part of their life. They ate it. They used the shells to make tools like shovels and bowls. They used the shells to decorate baskets, to make jewelry, and they traded it to other California Indians for things they couldn't get here in Monterey, like obsidian, which is a volcanic rock that grows in other parts of California. So you guys are kind of young, but there was a movie that came out about 25, 30 years ago, or maybe your parents and teachers have seen this movie called Dances with Wolves. Anybody see that movie? It's on cable TV all the time. You really can't miss it now. That's about Indians in South Dakota. So if you watch the film closely, next time you get a chance to see it, you'll notice that there's a lot of abalone in the clothing, in the regalia that they're wearing. Well, as far as I know, there is no abalone in South Dakota, right? It's got to get there some way, right? It's going on these trade routes. A lot of it starts right here in Monterey. And here is the best part, is that the word abalone, which is a word used all over the world today, right? That word comes from the Rumsian people, who had a word for the red abalone. Let's see if I have my red abalone in here. Red abalone. Yeah, red abalone, exactly. Like this one you see right here. This is the big guy. That word is aloon. Can you all say that? Let's say it again. Aloon. So there are scientists called linguists who trace languages. Isn't that a cool thing? They study languages. And they were able to trace that word abalone all the way back to Monterey and that word alloon for this guy right here. Pretty cool, huh? So they were the first real commercial fishermen in Monterey with the Rumsian people. You all know what that word means, commercial? What's your name?
Kane.
I'm sorry?
Kane.
Kane? Did y'all hear what Kane said? Say it again, a little louder.
As in they're really good at their trade.
That's how they made their living, right? And they would go out into the bay and fish for everything that was out there. Well, we're lucky today, isn't it? It's beautiful out here today, right? Well, you know, it's not always like this here in Monterey, particularly in the summer months. You know, and you know, they actually had a song that they would sing to get rid of the fog. Can you believe that? So I knew I was going to do this tour today, and so I wanted you guys to have a nice sunny day in Monterey. So I actually got into my time machine this morning, and I went back in time, and I recorded them singing that song. So I thought, because I'm not going to sing it for you, but I thought I would play it for you, and then we'll keep the sun here, and you can hear of voices that were sung here in Monterey, right where we are right now, 5,000 years ago. That's an amazing thing, isn't it? Man, I think it's the coolest thing. So let's see if this works. I hope it does. You know, I don't even drive a car, so let's hope this does what it's supposed to do. Here we go.
And if you sing it long enough, it works. Guaranteed.
It does. Look how beautiful it is out there right now. And what that song is saying in Rumsian, right? It's telling fog to go home out there past the bay out there, because Pelican, you all know Pelican, right? Because Pelican is out there and he is going after your wife. So the native people were the world first commercial fishermen. Spanish came, the Spanish weren't fishermen. They never understood how to utilize this bay out here. 1846, we went to war with Mexico. 1848, they signed, 1849, they signed the Constitution here in Monterey. In 1850, we became a state, and Monterey went to sleep. It actually was referred to in those days in the newspapers. Monterey was actually referred to as Rip Van Winkle Town, the town that went to sleep. A lot of really neat things happened in Monterey in those days. In particular, a small group of Chinese fishermen sailed across the Pacific. There's actually a series of currents. Y'all know what currents are? Sail across the Pacific, and these currents pushed them all the way across. In fact, the Chinese used to call those currents the black tide or the big drain. It comes out somewhere near Cape Mendocino in Northern California, and then they turned right and sailed down the west coast, eventually landing here in Monterey. In fact, they initially landed out at Point Lobos. Anybody been to Point Lobos? So you all been out there, so you all know that Point Lobos is the center of the universe, right? Yeah, it is. And so they all came out to Point Lobos, and actually came initially for, this is a big story, for this guy right here. They came initially for abalone. They looked out into the bay here and saw that nobody was fishing out there. And the reason nobody was fishing out there was because there was no way to get fresh fish to the big markets like San Francisco, because the railroad hadn't arrived here yet, right? Well, the Chinese, who've been fishing for centuries, they understood this technology of drying all of their fish. So they would dry all of their catch. Then once a month or so, this big Chinese junk would come down from San Francisco, pick up all this dried fish, and ship it back to China, or they would send it to other Chinese camps along the west coast. And they were also selling fresh fish to the local citizens here in Monterey. Early 1850s, another group of them came and they settled over where the Monterey Bay Aquarium is, Hopkins Marine Station. That became the largest Chinese fishing village on the west coast. And they fished for everything was out there because they had no real competition. I want you guys to repeat after me, okay? Ready? Repeat. Bolea!
Bolea!
Let's try it again. Bolea!
Bolea!
Better. Who knows what language that might be? Native American? Anybody else? See, if you know your geography, there is a country that's next to Spain. That starts with a P.
Portugal.
Portugal, of course. And what does it mean in Portuguese? Whale, right?
Oh.
Now why would I tell you how to say whale in Portuguese here in Monterey? What's that? You think there were Portuguese whalers here? Yeah, of course there were. And how do you think they got here? What? In ships. So they say, so in the early 19th century, 18th century, and whales and whaling products were something that this country really needed to have. The big whaling companies out of Nantucket and New Bedford, which are back east, would go on these 3, 4, and 5-year whaling cruises. Usually the first place they went to were the Azores, which are these little islands off the coast of Portugal. They pick up these Azorean whalers who are known to this day to be great whalers, right? They then sail down the eastern seaboard and around the Cape Horn and up the California coast, all the way up to Alaska, and all the way across the Pacific to Japan. And they wouldn't return to their home port until they filled the whole of their whaling ship with whale oil. This could take up to 5 years until you got home. But something happened in California in 1848. What was that shiny stuff that was discovered on the American River? Gold was discovered, and all these ships came into San Francisco. Hey, let's say we made up the crew of a whaling ship out of Nantucket. Had to smell dead whale every single day for the last 2 years, and they told you there was gold up on the hills for the taking. What are you going to do? Heck, without whaling, I'm going to get me some of that gold. And that's exactly what these Azorean whalers did. But when they got up to those gold fields, they found out that it wasn't as easy as they were told. So they said, heck with that, I'd rather be whaling. So they go back to San Francisco, but they have no money because they didn't get any gold, and they have no way to get home because everyone had abandoned their ship. So they're kind of stuck. So around 1854 or so, 17 of these guys are starting to appear in San Francisco. One guy goes, hey, you know, I remember going by Monterey. There were a lot of whales down there, and it sure looked a lot like home. And they set up a whaling station right over here. And they began whaling what they called the old-fashioned way. 6 guys in a boat. Let's see if I have a picture here. Let's see. All right. 6 guys in a boat. They would push off of the beach every morning, where they would row or sail out to the whaling ground, just like this guy right here. Can you imagine hunting a 100-foot blue whale, a little teeny boat like this?
Dangerous.
Yeah, this is how they would do it. They'd row or sail out, they would see a whale, they would yell out, baleia, which means whale in Portuguese, and this guy would fire this gun. This is called the Greener's gun because it's invented by a guy named Greener. You can see it has a rope attached to the harpoon that was attached to the boat. This was not designed to kill whales, but in fact was designed to slow them down. They'd see that whale and fire this harpoon to the whale. If you were a whale, got hit with a sharp harpoon, what would you do? Sometimes those whales would turn and sink these boats, or sound or dive to the bottom. If this guy wasn't fast enough and cut the rope, he got dragged down with them. Most of the time the whale would start running through the bay, dragging these guys behind them for hours at a time. And all the people that lived in Monterey in those days would line up along the coastline here and watch these guys get dragged through the bay. They used to call that a Nantucket sleigh ride. Finally, the whale would slow down, and they would hit it with big long hand harpoons, and yes, they would kill it. That was the name of the game, right? Then usually the whale will sink. So they'll put little markers out there because it will float back to the surface about 10 days later. Anybody here ever raised goldfish? Yes, you all know how that works, right? So they tie a rope behind his tail, they tow it back to the beach, right over here, where they'd strip off the blubber. All they wanted was the blubber. They were inner parts of these dead whales. Then the currents, again, those currents, being what they are, would push the carcass of those dead whales right onto this beach, right there. At one time, that beach was littered with dead whale and whalebone. I have. You see you got a beach full of dead whale, what else do you think you might get down there? Didn't smell very good, that's for sure. Big, giant grizzly bears would come out of those hills behind us there, come down to this beach to feed off the carcass of those dead whales, because grizzly bears love to eat whales. And I've read accounts of people, all the way up there, I've read accounts of people who lived in Monterey in those days, and they said at night they could hear these grizzly bears walking through their neighborhoods. So did I ever hear anybody in Monterey complain about raccoons getting in their garbage? Yeah, forget it. So the whaling industry in Monterey Bay was very, very profitable. It also was very, very competitive. We started out with 17 whalers in 1854. By 1870, you know what? There were a couple hundred here. They sent for their families, they were living here. There were up to 5 whaling companies operating on this bay at one time. It wouldn't be unusual for more than one whaling company to converge onto the same whale, and they would have battles out on the bay over whose whale it belonged to. They'd actually end up suing each other in court, and some judge would have to determine whose harpoon went into the whale first. So the harpoonist would work with the local blacksmith. That's the guy who made his harpoon, and he put little secret marks on the tip of his harpoon point. Then the judge can go, oh, that's Jose's harpoon. That belongs to the Monterey Whaling Company. Monterey whaling industry began to slow down after 1874, not because these guys took too many whales, because the truth is they never took that many. They lost far more whales than they ever got. Because other products were invented that began to replace whale oil. In particular, a product called kerosene. Anybody go camping? Sometimes you buy kerosene to burn in your lamps. Kerosene is a man-made product, and they couldn't compete with it. So they became full-time farmers, ranchers, dairymen, other kinds of fishermen. It was Portuguese whalers that started tuna fisheries in California. So next time you eat a tuna sandwich, you can thank a Portuguese whaler for it. There was one company that continued to operate strictly for the tourists who are now coming to Monterey and love to watch these guys get dragged through the bay. Today, the Monterey area has a very large Portuguese community. Actually, many who live not too far from where you guys live. Many can trace their descendants back to these original 17 whalers that came to Monterey back in 1854. Pretty cool, don't you think? Yeah. All right, so I got something for you to see if you can do this. Who knows what this guy is? Fish. It's the fish that made Monterey famous. Sardine, yeah, that's right. Who likes to eat sardines? You ever eaten them? What do you think of this guy? It's kind of big, don't you think? Most people think of those sardines, they think of the big guys right there. This. Is that real? What do you think? So, this guy, this guy is the fish that made Monterey famous. The largest fishery of a single fish, right, in the history of the United States, right here in Monterey. Lasted about 35 years. That's it. From about 1915 to about 1950, they took an average of 235,000 tons of this fish out of that bay every year. From August 1st to February 15th. That was big, big business. Anybody who lived in Monterey in those days had some kind of connection to the sardine fishery. They either had friends who worked in it, they either fished in it, or they worked in those sardine canneries all along the Monterey waterfront, canning this fish. But you know what? This fish was never a popular guy to eat. Yeah, people didn't like it. People were used to those little guys. And you know, the truth is that almost every small silvery fish is referred to as a sardine. What this guy is actually known as a pilchard, or the true sardine. That's what this guy is. And people thought it was too oily. And so the real money was actually in the byproducts, where they were taking the heads and tails and the guts of the sardine, and they're grinding it up to make other products like fertilizer and animal feed. Next time you guys go to the market, or your parents go to the market and you guys buy Foster Farms chicken, or you have chicken for dinner, you can thank this guy right here for your chicken dinner. Do you know? Because prior to 1920, the chicken industry in California, it wasn't doing very well. People didn't eat chicken like we do today. It was kind of expensive. They began to produce this cheap chicken feed of the heads and tails and offal of this guy right here. The chickens loved it, thrived on it. More and more chickens were being produced. The price of chicken went down. People began to buy chicken. My friend Bill Ripley, who was a retired biologist, used to say that Foster Farms chicken owes its life to the bones of the Monterey sardine. It's true. So the fishery finally collapsed in 1950, and for a lot of reasons, not just so much they overfished them, but other issues. Water temperature change out here in the bay, and we now know that sardines and anchovies, which are smaller, also schooling fish, all run in these cycles and make these massive disappearances every 30 and 40 years. And so we now think when we began to heavily fish this guy, he was already kind of on that declining cycle. And we just hastened the process. And in fact, this fish is a fully recovered fishery today, and they actually fish sardines out in the bay again out here in California, but where do you think they sell them? Fish market. But where do you think? I was in Japan in September, in Tokyo. I went to the largest fish market in the world in Tokyo called the Tsukiji Fish Market. You know what I found in that fish market? Monterey sardines. That's where the market is. It's all over there in Asia. So here's a photograph of my friend, Roy Hitori. Can you see it? Roy is the last of the Japanese abalone divers. Japanese abalone divers started coming to Monterey about 1895. And Roy is the only diver, Japanese diver, that was born here in Monterey. So I asked him, I said, Roy, how did you learn how to do this? And he told me when he was a young man, actually not much older than you guys are right now, really. This is in the 1930s. His father wanted to get into the abalone business, but he had no experience. He had no business in it, but he had some friends who were. So he borrowed some equipment, and he took Roy in a little boat right here, right where we are right now. And he dressed him up in this wool underwear that the divers wore. Dressed him up in this heavy canvas suit. He took about 75 pounds of lead weight, attached that to his front and back, tied lead to his shoes, bolted on the big heavy helmet, and they just tossed him off the side of the boat. Said, you start running down there. And that's how he learned to be an abalone diver. I asked Roy if he ever had any problems down there as a diver, and he told me sometimes the currents, those old currents again, sometimes the currents would be really strong and kick up rocks. And one time a rock kicked up and hit him in the helmet. Here's the picture of Roy diving, hit him in the helmet and cracked the glass on his helmet. This is the 1930s, so if you're 30 feet below the Monterey Bay, you just cracked the glass on your helmet, what are you going to do? Yeah, but you know what? It's going to take a long time to get back up. Because he has to release this valve that fills up his suit with air, and then they got to pull him up. It's just a long time. So you know what he did? And I think this is the most remarkable thing. He reached into his abalone basket, he pulls out an abalone, right, which remember is just a big marine snail, takes the abalone and sticks on the glass. And the abalone seals up the crack and stops the water from coming in. Then he pulls on his lifeline, goes to the surface, they change the glass, and he starts all over again. So today, they raise abalone at the abalone farm right down there at the end of the wharf down here. So, yeah. That was your friend? Yeah, they're right now. That was your friend? This is my friend Roy. Yeah, you know what? He actually just passed away over Christmas. He was 90, almost 93 years old. All right, so I think I bored you guys enough.